Hey, this is Joel Duff. Welcome back to my channel. And today I've got answering student questions. Actually, just one question this time. This is an excerpt of what became a 5.5-hour video that I made for my students this summer. Right? They asked in a discussion forum a series of 25 questions, 25 students, 25 questions, and I decided I would do a video response to them. In my class, when I'm doing face-to-face, they ask anonymous questions, and I have to stand in front of the class and give somewhere between a 2 and a 5-minute response. Now, I'm not limited to the 5 minutes since I was on video, and obviously I wasn't limited because I went for hours and hours and hours. Some students got an entire lecture in response. So I've taken a couple of those questions, and I've made small videos out of those. And then eventually I'll publish the entire video. But I just want to remind you, as you listen to my responses, these are mostly on the fly. I mean, I didn't do a lot of preparation to answer these questions. I simply looked at it and said, here's how I would respond to that. Here's some thoughts of mine. And those thoughts also are in the context of this is a class that has a broad spectrum of students in it from a wide variety of different backgrounds and different opinions about mostly the topic of evolutionary biology. And so my responses have that in mind. Some of my responses are a little different than maybe the tact I would take if I were sitting down with you over a cup of coffee and talking about these subjects, or if I was talking to a specific critic or something like that. So just bear that in mind in terms of the style of response that I'm going to provide for some of these questions. I'm also in a sort of a teaching mode because I'm trying to use my responses to help them understand some principles. So I'm breaking down some of their questions into fundamental assumptions and trying to derive sort of like things that I know that they're going to need to know, through the rest of the class, and trying to sort of squeeze those elements into my answers to their questions. Okay, so with that caveat, or those caveats, let's proceed to answering a student question. Coming on up. I never put much thought into evolution. I took in the information I was told and applied it when I needed. Of course, reading it made sense to me. Seeing how animals and bugs changed and adapted to their environment over time, that makes sense to me. I think where I really drew the line was when it came to the evolution of humans. I think this is a common sentiment, okay? I think a lot of people, and I hear this a lot from, like, I'd say religious friends of mine, right? They're like, yeah, I'm okay with the evolution thing, but human beings. Right? It's like, that's all good. I kind of get that. That's okay. But that's where I draw the line. Basically saying we came from apes just never made sense to me. Like, I understand we're similar, but that gave someone the idea to think, but what gave someone the idea to think that we could have possibly evolved from them? As a Christian, now I started to hear more about how evolution was not real and that God created each animal and bug for a reason. At first, it didn't make sense to me because of everything I'd learned in the past. But then I got to thinking about, hey, maybe people are wrong about evolution. So my question would be, why is evolution so important now when people are coming out against it and even saying that it's not real? I mean, I understand people have evidence to back things up, but why do we really rely on it so much when there's so much misinformation out there? I think this is a great question. Now, I don't mean it's a great question because, how do I mean that? I think it's a good question because I think it represents the angst of a lot of young people about the world we live in today. And why do I say that? Because this last part here. I mean, I understand people have evidence to back things up. Now, of course, what they've suggested is, well, there's evidence to back up that God made each creature separately and that here's evidence for why evolution is not real. I just visited a local creation museum here in the area. And if you didn't know anything about evolutionary biology, didn't really know science very well, and you walked through that museum, you would come away with a very strong sense like, wow, there's all this evidence that the world is really young. There's all this evidence that everything is designed and nothing could have been made by any process. It had to have been made by a creator, right? An intelligent being, intelligent design. And those are very powerful arguments. And so then you have others who are saying, well, like, okay, here's all this evidence for evolution. So everybody has their own side, right? Everybody has their own evidence. So, but why do we rely on it so much when there's so much misinformation out there? All right, this is kind of confusing, but there's evidence on both sides, but then how do I trust? Obviously, one side has to be wrong, so one side is presenting misinformation, and there's just so much misinformation out there. The last part of it pretty much just like this is where a lot of people are at. It's like, I don't even know what to believe anymore, right? We have alternative facts for everything. Everybody can make their own facts to fit whatever story they want. And after a while, you kind of get worn down, right? You just get worn down. You get worn down by people that are so insistent that something must be true, and they keep throwing more stuff at you. I mean, the whole, actually, I don't want to say the word because it's going to be on YouTube and then I'll get flagged. All right, I think of the younger generation today. They hear the alternative facts out there about everything, and everybody has an opinion, but they also say they have the evidence to back up their opinion. They're always throwing like, oh, this proves this proves this, this proves this. And pretty soon what you have is you have 10 different ideas out there, and everybody is totally insistent and sounds incredibly confident that they're right. And you are kind of left with like, well, how do I decide? How do I decide? And there's so many times we get burnt because we go down something that sounds good to our ears, sounds reasonable, and then later we find out, no, that was a bunch of bunk, right? That was all made up stuff. People are literally making up facts, right? It's not even just reinterpretation of facts. The facts even aren't the facts in today's world. And so everything seems to be misinformation. Now, I'm going to go back and say that this is one of the advantages of science. If you're a scientist and if you really understand science and you understand the scientific process, this is one way to escape this conundrum of misinformation. Right? It takes a lot of work, but you can test ideas. You can collect information. You can draw hypotheses and test them and weigh the evidence. And the scientific method gives you a way of saying, this idea, this hypothesis is better supported than this other one. At least it gives you some direction to go. Now, this question suggests like, okay, I started hearing one thing and this seemed reasonable to me, but then there's other days that don't feel reasonable. And then I started to hear about how evolution was not real, that God created all the animals and bugs each for a reason, right? So, I was told that evolution is not real. That's a really common thing to hear among some different groups of Christians, especially like young earth creationists. And so it can leave a person feeling very overwhelmed. I think you're taking a class like mine, and hopefully we're going to go somewhat in an organized fashion. We're going to go through a whole bunch of different areas of evolutionary biology and show what has been learned about all those different areas. And you might be quite convinced of some of those things, but there might be some other aspects of evolutionary biology you're not terribly, convinced by. And part of the reason you're not convinced is maybe because this is just a cursory look. I mean, to be honest, one semester is a very cursory look at evolutionary biology. And so we have to be very general in some cases. And so what you need to remember is you can't just say, well, I didn't understand that, or that wasn't convincing, so therefore it's not true. It's kind of incumbent upon you to explore further. So again, I go back to don't make rash decisions. Don't throw one thing out of the other. Also, if you have strong convictions that different parts of evolutionary theory are completely incompatible with my religious beliefs, I wouldn't come to you and say, okay, now here's the science, here's all this evidence, it's incompatible, therefore you need to change your mind. Right? No. In fact, I would say you should not change your mind based on just one presentation of the evidence. Because I wouldn't want you to live your life like that. I wouldn't want you to be like, I just watched this YouTube 2-hour video on X topic, right? And boy, that person was really convincing about the best abs device in order to get rid of fat. Right? If you're convinced by that just based on one viewing, and then you're going to change your whole life and you're going to change your diet, well, you shouldn't jump to that conclusion that fast. I'm going to say the phrase, you should do your own homework, right? But of course, doing your own homework in the context of what I mean is, not just looking at Twitter and Facebook and seeing what other people said about that YouTube video. It means actually going in the literature and seeing whether there is evidence to back up what they said. Right? And that's the thing, as a biologist, because you're taking biology and you're going to learn a whole bunch of biology. Hopefully you're going to have the tools when you're done with this to at least be able to assess the validity of biological questions about this world. All right? Ideas that involve things about the science of biology. You should be able to discern. This seems to be a well-supported idea. This is a less supported idea. And if this is a really well-supported idea, then that's an area where I need to consider, how does that jive with other things I've learned? And that's where you might then start to form certain types of tension that might take a long time to be resolved. But you also might resolve them very quickly by understanding that I just don't want to make a snap decision. I heard one thing, I heard one fact, and then I just changed my whole outlook on life because of that. No, don't do that. Right? You heard me talking in this class, and you said after the class was done, which I've had many students tell me, it's like, I didn't know any of this stuff. And it was really fascinating. It was really interesting to see like the connections and just like how biology works. I really see how like all of biology is kind of connected through evolutionary theory, all population genetics and natural selection, all that stuff. It's really cool. And it really did make me think about things that I had never thought of before. And I was always told that like all this is just nonsense. And obviously it isn't nonsense. So now what do I do? And I don't say like, yes, you should just believe science. And if it's incompatible with anything else you believed before, you should just throw all that stuff out and just completely convert. All right. No, I wouldn't want you to do that. I don't want to be responsible for that. If in the long run, you explore this further and you really deeply think about all of your different ideas and the different influences in your life, and you begin to shift some of your beliefs, all right? Shift some of the explanations for really important questions about this world, right? And the purpose of this world. And in other words, you're balancing those things in a different way. Then that's fine. That's great. I think that everyone is growing in their understanding of themselves in this world by doing that. But it shouldn't be a process that just happens overnight. It shouldn't be a switch that's flipped, because it can be dangerous to move from one idea to another without any kind of reflection upon it over a long period of time.